Execution has been a popular form of punishment throughout the world since the Middle Ages. It was often inflicted on large numbers of crimes. Most death sentences involve different kinds of torture, such as burning at the stake, breaking at the wheel, and slow strangulation. Such harsh punishment and torture died out around the 18th century. Then came the forms of execution by the guillotine, the wheel, burning at the stake, the garrote, hanging, and the headman's axe. Burning at the stake was a popular death sentence and means of torture. It was used mostly for heretics, witches, and suspicious women. The wheel was a method of torture and execution. It could be used in a number of ways. A person could be attached to the outer rim of the wheel and then rolled over sharp spikes or down a hill. Also, the wheel could be laid on its side like a turntable with the person tied to it. The wheel would turn and people would take their turns beating the victim with iron bars, breaking bones, and eventually causing death. The guillotine became a popular form of execution in France in 1789 when Dr. Joseph Guillotine proposed that all criminals be executed by the same method, and that torture should be kept to a minimum. Decapitation was thought to be the least painful and most humane method of execution at the time. Hanging was a popular way of both executing and torturing a person, with many devices available to aid the procedure. The prisoner could simply be hung with a noose fracturing the neck. Often a person would be drawn and quartered before being hung. First they were drawn to the place where they were to be killed. They might be dragged behind a wagon that was attached to a horse, and then they were hung, disemboweled, beheaded, and your body quartered or cut into 4 parts. The garrote was also a popular method of torture and similar to hanging. A mechanical device, such as a rack or a gag, would be tightened around the person's neck, causing slow strangulation. The headman's axe was when an executioner, usually hooded, would chop off the person's head with an axe or sword.
In the late 1500s, people began protesting the witch hunts. One of the biggest reasons that the witch trials were protested is because they were illegal. You weren't supposed to kill a person unless they had confessed to a crime. Most of the time, any confessions that were made were false because they were being tortured so badly. It was found that hardly any of the witch trials were conducted legally. Protesters thought that unless a woman could be proved guilty with proper legal procedure, they should be released without punishment. For obvious reasons, the witch hunts weren't the least bit ethical. They were extremely cruel and tortured the women in horrible ways. They didn't treat the witches in any way fair. In fact, many women didn't even survive the torturing. However, most people were skeptical that witches even existed.
Witches don't exist! Witches don't exist! They're innocent! Save the women!
Some people warned against confusing witchcraft with mental illness. French surgeon Pierre Pigray was asked to examine the accused witches, and he just said that the only reason that these women were acting strange was because they needed medical care and were very deluded.
The declines of the witch hunts in Europe were a gradual process that took decades to finally end. Some of the witch hunts ended because many people feared that they were going too far and innocent people were being executed. People also became skeptical about the so-called spectral evidence. Some scholars also pointed out that popular belief about witches had no support from the Bible. Many people believed that witches existed but did not believe in the more ludicrous stories about them. People didn't necessarily stop believing in witches right away, but they became more cautious about accepting evidence of witchcraft, realizing that many maladies and mishaps have natural causes. In the 17th and 18th century, more people were opposed to using torture to obtain confessions, not necessarily because it was cruel, but because it was not a reliable source of a confession. In the 18th century, it became fashionable to regard witchcraft as just a superstition. The last witch was executed in 1682.
Remember, we're looking for witches.
Okay.
Wait, what was that? I don't know. I must just be like imagining things. Witch!